Welcome to the Women in Transport podcast. I'm your host, Shireen Ali Khan, and this is season 2, where we are covering everything intersectionality. We're looking at the layers that make us who we are. We're looking at privilege, looking at oppression, and really what makes us human. Welcome to this episode of the Women in Transport podcast. I am joined by the amazing Kim Kapur. So I have to say amazing because I've wanted to do this interview for ages. She knows this. I've got loads of questions because Kim's experience isn't linear like everyone's that we speak to. But I really want to dig into her experiences in this sector, other sectors, and really all the transport stuff that we'll dive into. At the moment, Kim is a director at HS2, but it almost doesn't matter because she's been here, there, and everywhere. And that's the stuff that I'm interested in. So Kim, over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Kim Kapur, and I think it's important to know that I'm a mum as well, mum of 2 sons, and so that's quite a big part of my life and has helped shape my career journey as well. Because we have to manage both. So I'm a mum of 2 boys, and like you say, I'm working at HS2 at the moment, but I have a long career in transport at Transport for London at TfL, and I am technically still TfL. I'm externally seconded to HS2, so my home is still at TfL. But I'm sure we're going to get into where my career started and how I ended up where I have. So I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I definitely, at some point, I'm going to come to an external secondment because I know that's not usual. So I'm definitely going to come back to that. Tell me a little bit about your experiences, because I know that you've come from a different sector and actually you have worked in transport for a significant part of your career. But I feel like there was a journey there that took you from another sector into transport. So what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I started in comms, the communications or telecommunications industry, and I was doing project coordination, project management for cable and wireless, a company called WorldCom that's now Verizon, a company called Level 3 Communications. And this was all around the sort of the dot-com bubble before the bubble burst. There was this whole big thing about, putting fiber in the ground and voice over IP and all this kind of stuff, and all this network that we have now and the ability to run high-speed internet services and whatnot is off the backbone of that kind of thing happening. And there was a lot of work to be done in having that infrastructure in place. So a lot of companies had sort of tapped into the market into the UK, so a lot of American companies. And I found myself working in that industry. I made a conscious decision to be in that industry because I knew that it was that sort of up and coming, the next big thing. And I knew that, if I went into the industry doing whatever, to start with, it just meant that I would be able to grow within it. And I did. I was a coordinator, coordinating people digging up the road and putting cable in, as simple as that. And then went from there to sort of project manage for another company, WorldCom, the project management of delivering the sort of fiber networks across Europe. And I was assigned a country and with Germany, and we'd create the capacity in that country for our customers so that we could, whilst we were selling bandwidth, we were able to, we had the infrastructure in place to enable us to sell that bandwidth. So I worked very closely with salespeople who were selling circuits or bandwidth, and I was the implementation and delivery person that was making sure that it was all delivered through the engineers and whatnot. So I've always worked around engineers. And I guess physical work in some respect, because it obviously is building slightly different to what I've been doing recently. But that was it. And then I made the transition into rail because the dot-com bubble burst. I found myself redundant, and I had obviously had some colleagues that were all in the same boat. And one of my colleagues had got a job and he had to build a team to support enabling works of this new rail radio system that was being rolled out on the underground. It's called Connect. And those are the people that will know Connect. It's a very old radio system now, so that kind of tells you how old I am. I was sort of asked, do you want to come and do this? It's, coordination, sort of program management type stuff. So I said, yeah, sure. Obviously, I'd be made redundant. And it was a good transition because it was still comms, but it was in rail. So it was quite neat. I was able to straddle both for a period of time. And I still didn't really understand, obviously, about railways, but I did understand that we were working in a very different environment to what we were used to. And there were particular nuances about how we did what we did. I just couldn't get my head around it. And only railway people know this, by the way, because if you're in it, you know it,
Yeah.
all the restrictions around what you can and can't do and all the rest of it. So that was the sort of my first sort of taste of working in rail. And then I went on from there to take up a job in London Underground as a project manager, delivering the Category 1 standard upgrades, which was something else that was the start of the PPP, and we needed to get our standards in place. And so yeah, I went over, and that was my step into what is now TfL proper, if you like.
I love that, because what you described there is a lot of growth. So the whole .com, and for people who might not know about that, I'd say Google it. But I think if you could tell us a little bit about the experiences, what it was like actually at that time, because we said this kind of earlier in some of our conversations around what life was like pre-internet, and we do definitely take it for granted just how connected we are. So tell me a little bit about the innovation that kind of maybe drew you into comms, because actually I've quoted you. You said here about growing with it, that you saw kind of a need of being in a sector that was growing, and you kind of thought, well, I'll kind of grow with it. And I can really see that resonate in the rest of your career, which we'll jump into shortly. But just describe what it was like in that .com period.
It was really exciting. It was new and pioneering, and it was a really young industry. I'd say the average age of the people I work with was sort of late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s. It was
Yeah.
quite a young demographic. And so we had a lot of fun doing what we were doing, and I was really young then as well. I was in my 20s, so early 20s. So for me, it was like exciting, and it was something that we knew that we were creating the foundations for something. And I guess I was young and I really didn't understand the full scale of what it is now, what we use, and that this was what it was starting. But just knowing that we were doing something for a bigger purpose was really, it was kind of really exciting, and it really sort of helped us to sort of really come together and just do things. And we were really energetic with it as well. There wasn't ever a time where, oh, let's just sit down. It was like, right, we've got to do this, let's get on with it. And there was no restrictions. We just got on with what we need to do within limits of safety and that kind of thing. But yeah, it was a very exciting time when it all came crashing down. And some of us, and I guess people like me who were so young in the industry as well, we didn't understand what had happened almost, overnight.
Mm.
But it was a bit of a, oh, okay, kind of thing. You find yourself at a loss because you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Like I put all my eggs in one basket. I had, banked on having a long career in this industry, and I'd had a great time doing what I was doing, and it wasn't like I was doing a bad job, clearly, but it wasn't just about me. It was lots of people were made redundant from that. So I guess, for me, yeah, it was really exciting. Knowing it was for a greater purpose was really good, and it helped sort of create that sense of, yeah, we're doing something here that's going to make a major difference.
Mm.
But also the fact that when it came crashing down, it was a huge blow, and you either getting, you go into your shell and you sort of feel sorry for yourself, or you go, nope, I'm going to go and find a job, and I'm going to pick myself up and move on to the next thing. And I guess I'm lucky that I met some really good people along the way, and I'd made a network of friends and colleagues at that time, and people, I guess you do, and everybody does this, don't they? When you're working with people that are good, you look for that. You look for that in others,
Mm.
or you'll look for that person, especially as a leader. I have in my head quite often, this is the kind of person. There's a name in my head of a person that worked a particular way, or knew a particular thing, or did something, and that's what I need now. Whether that's that person or somebody else, but I need this person to be like that because that's what I need. So I must have been that person to one of my colleagues, because he'd asked me to come and work with him. So it was that transition into rail, I think, via Connect, and that was how it was done.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sounds wonderful. And you described the Connect service as well, in almost in a similar sense around the .com, is it was a new thing. It's really innovative. And I kind of really see that innovation and that growth within your career, and actually just your way of thinking. And so you said the word purpose a few times. I'd really like to lean into that, if that's okay. Like, what does purpose mean for you? And you mentioned quite rightly at the beginning of the episode, actually, you're a parent as well. So I feel like purpose is quite a big thing for you as a person, as a human being. What does it mean for you?
I mean, I almost feel like I don't do things for the sake of doing them. That's just not the kind of person I am. I always have to feel like I'm making a difference. That's having a purpose. And whether it be having a purpose and being a small cog in a bigger machine, like I was, if you like, in the dot-com sort of era, working on the com stuff, or whether it's doing something meaningful as part of, a major program. So you find, I found myself always leaning towards huge change, things that are going to make a difference, things that are going to change the way people do what they do. And I kind of feel like it adds a meaning to why you do what you do as well. I want to be able to show, yeah, I did that, or I was a part of that, or, I had a hand to play in that. So I feel like, to me, that's my sense of purpose and knowing that whatever I do is making a difference. If I don't feel like I'm making a difference, it's probably time for me to move on and do something else.
I think that's really strong, and it's really great that you're aware of your own motivations and what drives you in the workplace. I kind of describe where we're at now in the transport and infrastructure as being like this new age of this kind of new industrial revolution is actually how I describe it, because there's so much that's happening. And yes, you can compare to other countries and you can kind of knock yourself down a little bit, but actually if you look at where the UK is right now, there is loads of growth. And I love being able to talk about the major projects that I've worked on. I've any opportunity, I'll tell people where I've been, because it is that sense of purpose. I love being able to tell my son when we're on the Elizabeth line, or did you know mummy worked here and I've been into these tunnels. Like I love being able to say that. And I really see that in other people where I certainly didn't build those tunnels and I was definitely a small cog in a massive wheel. But there is that sense of just drive and love and wanting to do something, because these things will outlive you and they will outlast you. And to be a part of that process for me has really been a big driver, because it's all about the big picture, isn't it? How has that motivated you into the next steps that you've taken around seeing that bigger picture?
I guess, sort of going back to my early career at sort of London Underground. And, when I started, I kind of was going to I was doing this job sort of as a project manager on these contracts, but on these standards. But what I learned very quickly was that the Underground was entering into a new era of huge change. It would just, set up this PPP arrangement with Metronet and Tube lines. And there was a massive program of change coming in terms of, modernization, refurbs, upgrades, that kind of thing. And I just found myself gravitating towards that. And my natural way of doing things, which was, sort of being a good organizer, bringing people together and trying to sort of move forward towards, what is it we're trying to achieve and that kind of thing, just lent itself to what we were about to enter. And of course, the Underground back then, and I'm talking obviously 20 years ago, was not the Underground or the TfL that we know now. And there were some very sort of archaic and backward ways of doing things, and perhaps some people were not even ready for the fact that we were part of this new thing called the PPP, and we had a part to play in it as well. And so I found myself in a place where I was actually leaning towards this fact that I'm going to make a difference, because I will be a small cog in this huge machine of change that's coming, but change that's going to benefit everybody that uses it, all our passengers, all the customers, and the operators and the people that work on it. So you kind of naturally find yourself leaning towards that. And my skills, I guess, were the kind of skills that were quite rare at that time within the engineering directorate. Because normally you would only expect to see engineers, and engineers engineer, but engineers don't necessarily always project manage. Well, that wasn't their role anyway. Of course, engineers can be project managers, but that wasn't the way it was set up. So having someone like me who wasn't an engineer but was trying to bring engineers together and get them to deliver was quite unique and a unique place to be. But it worked. Well, it didn't start that way. It was difficult to sort of get into it in terms of bringing people around, that kind of thing. But it worked in the end, because we were able to, really understand what we were doing, why we were doing it, when it needed to be done, that kind of thing. So it was really good.
Tell me a little bit about those relationships where you said that it didn't necessarily click or work at the beginning, but at the end it did. That for me described as there was a journey. What was it like? What were some of those challenges that you faced when you first came in as somebody who's not been in that room before?
Yeah, I think it's daunting. I wasn't even from the rail industry. I haven't got, at that time, whatever, 20, 40 years, what some people had at that time. I didn't understand any of that. And people were talking in acronyms. And I was like, oh my God, what are they talking about? And I'll never understand it. I distinctly remember sitting at my desk thinking, I am never going to get my head around this, and almost wondering what I had done. But what I had to do, and what I did naturally was get to know people and understand where they were coming from. And you can imagine, these are engineers, and they're not used to being asked by somebody, let alone somebody they've never met before, when are you going to do this by? And or we must have this done by X date. And it was a very difficult time. But for me, it's about understanding their perspective, understanding their points of view, and almost walking in their shoes to that extent, and taking them on the journey, helping them understand, why we need to do what we need to do. How I'm not there to do their job. I'm not an engineer. I need you, please, to help get this done. And, together, and I'll do that if you can do that. And, you sort of work together to get to the objective, or what it is you're trying to achieve. And, over time, I built trust with them, and built a rapport with them that meant that, like, within the sort of, I'd say, first year, I had a great relationship with these engineers. And quite often I was the person that people would almost phone if they needed to get through to them from around the business. It'd be like, Kim, can you have a word? Because, they'll listen to you, kind of thing. When that happens, you've arrived. It's
Yeah.
really funny, but you kind of know, yeah, I know the way to go about this with that person, because you've got to adapt your style depending on the person that you're dealing with. And for you to adapt your style, you have to understand the person. So you have to take a little bit of time to do that.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. You've mentioned around the value of relationships and people, and you've mentioned people even as service users, as well as people that you're in the room with. So I feel like you've got this real understanding of just the impact that not only you have, but also the work that you're delivering. Because we mentioned purpose. I feel like there's a real drive of service, actually is probably the word that I'm looking for, that all the work that you've done is about providing service, whether it's the end user or make sure the people in your room are together to deliver something. And yes, we can use monetary terms. Yes, we can say, it's public purse. We can say all these kind of more political terms, but actually to bring this into a really close conversation, it's people. I feel like everything is people. I'd love to hear more around some of the stuff that you mentioned. You mentioned around trust, you mentioned around rapport. I've really seen you just like this empathetic leadership style is kind of what I get from you. How does that sit with you? And is that conscious?
I mean, that's okay with me, by the way. I think that it's conscious to some extent, but actually it's just natural. I am almost that person that feels like, how would I feel if somebody did that to me?
Mm.
And I it's almost a constant question in my head. Why? Well, how would I feel? And I'm kind of this. I can't bear unfairness, and I think that's part of it. And I feel like, when something unfair is happening, I will speak up. But if it's fair and I can understand it, or I'll ask some questions and to understand it, then I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, it kind of is, yeah, fine, okay, is that way, kind of thing. So the empathy just comes from the fact that everyone's a human being. There are people that know certain things, there are people that don't, there are people that have, huge amounts of potential and capability, and some people that will stay where they are, and that's okay, because we need to all be different. You need all different flavors and shapes and sizes that make up a team or a group of people that will make a change or a positive delivery, or whatever. And I think that I'm one of those people that takes each individual for what they are. And if that comes across as being empathetic, then yeah, I have children, I have a family, and sometimes that means that, I've had to rush home because one of my sons has had an accident at school. Well, I know that. I know how that feels. Well, I'm not going to be any other way than sympathetic if somebody else needed to rush off, whoever they are, for whatever reason. It's just life. These things could happen to you as well. So you just have to understand that. And that to me is a style of leadership. It's not dictatorial in any way. And it's not, you must, it's not managing. That's the difference between the leadership and the manager is, I want people to succeed, and I'll always look out for the best in what they can do to succeed and help them succeed, because their success is my success as far as I'm concerned. Just there to unblock things along the way for them and help them out.
Yeah, I love that, because it is all about human beings. It's about helping them get the best experience, either in the workplace or from, using a certain service. And that's been really indicative through your career. I'd like to talk a little bit around transferable skills. And I know you mentioned around that kind of change in sector. And before we get onto more around some of the achievements that you've had, I really want to hear about some of the other work that you've done. But I'd like to talk about transferable skills, and then also about some of those those challenges, like, maybe around some of your intersections, some of the things that you might have had to uncover, or kind of, any barriers that you've had. But I think that's the direction I'll take this into. So transferable skills, and then around some of the barriers that you've had, if that's okay, Kim.
Project management, or we've put a label on it, it is project management, but project management is a collection of skills that, an individual may have. And to me, it's really about bringing people together, understanding what your objective is, what's the outcome, understanding that outcome, what is it you're trying to achieve, and knowing that you've got all the capability around you to enable you to deliver it. And of course, you've got to have the money, and of course, you've got to have your commercial levers and all the rest of it in place. But I'm not a financial expert, nor am I a commercial expert. But what I am is a person that can bring people together to deliver a result. Now, if it means that I can bring a team together with the financial expertise and the commercial expertise and the engineering expertise and the end user expertise and all the rest of it that needs to come together to deliver the outcome, then I'm happy to be that person. And that's the transferable skill. I did that in comms, as working with engineers and salespeople and, in foreign countries, as well as finance people and all sorts. And it was bringing that together to deliver this common outcome and purpose. And it's exactly what I've done as I've sort of transitioned into rail, that the transferable skill is that, and being able to understand your stakeholders and understand people. Well, that goes without saying, doesn't it? It probably doesn't matter what job you do. You need to know that. You need to understand. Everyone has stakeholders, no matter what you're doing. So you kind of understanding people's, what's driving them, in the workplace, that is, that helps as well. So you can sort of go in with a little bit of an understanding. Okay, that's driving them. Okay, that's going to cause them a problem. I see that. Okay, let's look at something a bit different. Or, all right, well, maybe we'll have to go. We might have to take that risk or something. You kind of have to go with your eyes wide open and get to know them. So, yeah, I guess the transferable skills are those.
Yeah, I love that, and it's just that need, I think, and that ability to kind of pull your sleeves up and just get stuck in. It's really evident in your journey. But to achieve stuff, you have to do stuff, and to do that stuff, you have to be close to the people. And so I can really see that in there. We've discussed a lot around your leadership style and how you've helped to affect and deliver change. I'd like to move on to some of the barriers that you might have faced, and I don't want to make any presumptions. Have you found at any time kind of your intersections as a human being had either been a barrier or indeed been an opportunity? I'd love to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, not so much in the comms industry. I'll be really honest with you. In telecoms, while I was there, I didn't really feel it. I didn't feel any different. I did feel it when I arrived in the rail industry, just because the normal average demographic wasn't what I am, and it's still not, but it was even less at that time. You're sure there were women, but there weren't that many, especially not in engineering. I don't think that when I joined in the chief engineers group at London Underground back then, that there's possibly only one female engineer, and she was in a senior position in a group of 40.
Wow.
That's changed now, obviously. But, it was very different. I never look at my race or my gender as anything other than, well, it's just what I happen to be, right? I'm me, I do what I do. It's what how I do it. That's what you are buying or want. I never want that to be anything other than that. I want to be employed because you want what I can give or what I can do. But I found it really hard at the beginning to build that credibility and be able to sort of hold, people to see me as a peer, as an equal in some respects. It was a very different time then. I do remember walking into a meeting room once, and I was with my boss, and somebody presumed that I was there to take the minutes. And I wasn't. I was there as a participant in this meeting, and, I happened to be a female in a room full of men, but they assumed that I was going to take the minutes. And do you know what? I took them because I didn't think that it was a fight worth having at that time. And to be fair, somebody had to do it, and I just did it. It didn't I was just, whatever, okay, fine, I'm just going to do it. And I think that you can make a fuss. You can say, well, I'm not going to, why would you assume that? But I also felt like there was no point in having that conversation with those people because I wouldn't get it. So I just carried on, kind of just did it. your time. Timing is everything. You have to have that. There's a moment to have that. So I kind of did it. But I did walk out of there and say to my boss afterwards, you know what? I said, that was really interesting. People assumed that I was there to take the minutes. And he said, well, you shouldn't have done it. And I said, well, we were trying to get through this meeting. It was really hard to organise, getting everyone together. It just felt like the wrong time to be having an argument over sexism. Really? So I've done it because we need to get through this. But probably maybe next time we could. And he was like, absolutely. And in the same vein, there would be things that I would say in a meeting and almost get ignored. And then a male would say the same thing and people would listen. And I would get extremely frustrated at that. That was more frustrating than me being, me taking the minutes, because that was almost a slight on my intellectual input to something. And I feel like that really gets on my goat. I've got something to say and you're not listening to me. All I ask is, to listen and give me the value of your time. That's it. But it was that was quite difficult. But I think that over time, as I built relationships and got to know people and built the network around me, you almost have to prove yourself. It's a real shame that you have to do that, but I did. And I was listened to and I was being heard. And a lot of that came from having unofficial internal sponsorship from people that had those voices at more senior level, because they saw something. And so they'd be like, oh, well, have you spoken to Kim? Or can you ask Kim this kind of thing? So that gives you the confidence to know, yeah, I'm doing the right thing and I am right. But also the fact that it gives that acknowledgement to other people that, oh, okay, well then okay, we better talk to her kind of thing, or ask her or whatever.
Hello, I'm Sonia Byers, Chief Exec of Women in Transport, and you're listening to the Women in Transport podcast. I'm proud of the work we're doing together to create a safe space for different women working in transport to share their stories. You can find details on how to join the conversation in the episode show notes.
Do you think it's harder for women to prove themselves? Because you said that actually you had to kind of prove yourself and then you got some of that respect. Do you think it is hard for women to prove themselves in our sector?
I think it was harder than it is now. I think it's getting better. I think as women, I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for all women. I can only speak for myself, really. As a woman, I guess, like I said, I don't see myself, as anything other than Kim Kapur, a person that does this or can do this or has the capability to do this. And that's all people should see. They shouldn't see the woman. They shouldn't see that I'm Asian. They shouldn't see anything other than the fact that there's this person that can do this, because I don't see that in others either. It doesn't matter what you are, who you are, whatever. If you can do the job, then that's what I need, But I do think that sometimes, depending on your personality, maybe, and how confident you are, you do feel like you have to work that little bit harder to prove yourself. Or sometimes, somebody like me, and, I'm pretty outspoken and vocal within reason, obviously. But I think that I possibly find it less difficult now. But then I'm probably more established. And don't get me wrong, I do have conversations with other junior members of staff that will say, oh my God, I've got so much to learn. And I'll be like, stand your ground, I'm here, got your back. Come on, you can do this. Just go say what you need to say. And if anyone says anything, then come and let me know and I'll go deal with it, kind of thing. I kind of feel like, you need someone that's got your back in any industry, in any job. And when you've got that person that's got your back, it's so powerful because it gives you so much confidence. And sometimes that's all you need is the confidence to know that someone's going to catch you if you fall.
Yeah. I just really love how you described that, around that sense of exactly as you just say, just catching you when you fall. And you described really well about how you're an ally for other people. And you mentioned around having champions, which is really, it's that whole journey of champion, mentor, ally, like it's all part of the same kind of same fabric. How important have networks been and champions been and mentors been? How does that sit with you?
So important. I don't think that I would have the career so far that I've had if I didn't have the champions and the supporters that I've had along the way. Right from the beginning when I first came into the underground, where I obviously made the transition into there because of the person that I was working with had moved over, the champion, the supporter, to then working for somebody else in the team or the head of at the time, who became my champion, who still will look on LinkedIn, he's retired now, and he'll go, oh, you're doing great, really proud of you kind of thing, which is great. But also then, every step of the way, having people that I've worked for that have been my biggest sort of supporters and champions, if you like. And there are, some real defining moments in my career where people have come in and it's almost really turned the tide of where my career is going. And it almost has gone from a program manager, senior project manager, head of, to the closeout director for Crossrail, to being a stations client director at HS2, to, the various roles that I'm now doing at HS2 in terms of transition, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's lots of people that have helped and supported me along the way. Do you want me to name drop?
Definitely, yeah. Give us all the champions, because it's really interesting. Like, my next question is actually around what recommendations would you give to somebody to be an ally? So not necessarily the recipient, but for people who are around us. Like, how would you encourage them to become allies and champions and support other people like you? And I don't necessarily mean, race, gender. I just mean other people who might be new to a sector or transitioning in from somewhere. How could they show up and help people around them?
I think just listening and understanding and taking time out for people is really important. I think you'll find that if you're the label, call it an ally, but actually it means nothing more than listening and understanding and giving them the confidence to say, no, you're doing the right thing. You're almost being a sounding board to some extent. Oh, I just did this, I'm not sure. Oh, I think, and it's like, well, is that the right thing to do? Yeah. Well, is this not your job? Yeah. Well, you can do it then. You almost need to give people that little boost of confidence. You've done nothing, haven't you? You've just listened. You've just dissected what they've told you and kind of almost told them what they already know, but you're another person that's told them that and almost clarified where they were going, they were thinking. And I did that. I was that person. I'd sit there and I'd be like, I'm not sure. I'm gonna, and I'd sit down with someone who I trusted to sort of listen to me and sort of explain some thinking or something I was thinking we needed to do or something different. And I'd say, what do you think? And I'd almost need that validation that, yeah, I've got this. And I don't think that that's wrong. I think everybody could do that, couldn't they? Because you then know that you're probably going to be pretty right at what you're doing, or whatever you're doing isn't going to go half wrong. So I think that's just normal, natural behavior that we should sort of just embrace. A bit of checking. Not everybody knows everything about everything, and so use the people around you that do, and fill the gaps with that knowledge and experience around you. So yeah, I think that that's kind of a way of just take time out, go for coffee. I mean, I could just I get lots of people asking me if they, oh, can we just grab coffee with you? And of course, within the limits of what I've got to do during my days, I'll make time for people just to spend half an hour just to say, yeah, sure, what's up, and sometimes it just is a listening, a bit of advice, a bit of, well, let me see what might make a phone call or something like that. So yeah.
Those relationships are so crucial, aren't they? And so I think now I would love you to name drop. Who are those people who have really listened to you and understood you?
One of the first times that I realized that somebody was really listening to me was and when I first met Mark Wilde, and I was explaining to him how the Elizabeth line and how our aspect of the Elizabeth line, the LU stations, were going to come together. Now, I had never had to sit down with the MD of LU and explain this, but I did this time. And he really took time to listen and understand. And what he then did was ask me to help him, if you like, in some respects, because he was new, and he would sort of have to attend certain forums and whatnot. And whilst he had a senior leadership team, there was this one person, i.e. me, that was actually in the depths of the detail of this. So he kind of used me as his sounding board. So see, that's kind of that thing that I was saying earlier about how how people need to talk to lots of different types of people to validate their understanding or their thinking. It's exactly what Mark was doing. And I felt incredibly I just felt like, oh my God, he's asking me, kind of thing. And then as time went on, more and more times, he would sort of say, what do you think? And he actually wanted to know. He wasn't just saying it, he actually meant it. So he was a great ally and a great supporter, and really saw the value of what I was doing, and understood that. And then Andy Lord came along, and Andy was another person, again, new to the underground and new to rail as well, right? And I had to get him up to speed on what was going on, as he'd just arrived to take over from Mark. And again, he put his trust in me to be that person that sort of managed that whole interface with the underground on Crossrail and these 5 huge stations that were about to come our way. And he backed me as well in the same way. He almost always, and both would say it to me, whatever you need, we're here to help. So it doesn't matter whether you think it's big or small, just pick up the phone. And sometimes, Andy's classic would be if something was going on, and then I'd sort of go back and at some point say something about it, and he'd say, well, why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, but Andy, it's like, you're the MD, like, why would you need to, like, and he'd be like, well, I could have helped, and you kind of realize that just because these people are in these really super senior positions doesn't mean that they can't still help you in some way. Of course, you're not going to go to them with every tiny little detail. You're going to sort things out. But when you know that things could have a major impact on a result or the end result, then you do have to. And then people like Andy Byford came along, and he was brilliant. He'd got, and this is the difference, is that Mark and Andy had already worked with me really closely, and obviously I had them as allies and sponsors, if you like, in the sense of, what we were doing on the Elizabeth line, and he'd come along, and so they'd both sort of said to them, oh, Kim's got this. So he'd already had a briefing from them on, what I was doing. So as soon as he arrived, and he kind of, when he met me, he was like, you're that Kim Kapur. He goes, and I was like, oh no. But it was actually really good, because he again became that person that was super supportive. And again, that same sort of, whatever you need, you've got it, just ask. And, at one point I remember him saying to me, when we were trying to bring into use an open Bond Street station, I remember him saying to me, Kim, and he rang me because we were in this forum, and there was a lot of, not tension as such, but there was a lot still to do. And there was a lot of nervousness around whether or not we could still bring it into use and open it when we actually did. Mm. And we had this meeting, and obviously the meeting ended and we went off, and he rang me and he said to me, look, he goes, I will not push for something if you tell me it's a no. But if you tell me it's a yes, then I'll back it. Wow. And I was like, okay. And he said, all I want you to do is try and get that open. And I said, I will do my very best. As long as it's safe and it's operable, I will do my very best. And I will tell you if it's not doable, and I will tell you why it's not doable. And he said, and that is all I ask of you. And that was it. I mean, wow. What more do you need from the commissioner at that point, And it was that kind of confidence in me that from these people, that they weren't telling me anything. They weren't telling me what to do. They just gave me this superb confidence that allowed me to just keep pushing forward, because, like I said earlier, I knew that they would catch me if I fell. There was no falling here, because I had this super network around me that was backing me all the way. And so I could cut through so much with the team and just keep driving and moving forward because I was doing the right thing. It was brilliant. It was just brilliant. Having that around me was just brilliant.
Well, I would love to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation. That just sounds so amazing. What I'm really picking up is just that real sense of trust, and and you said before around, catching people, and you do that for other people. People have done that for you. So I can really see that in your style, but I can really just see that sense of trust that comes into it. And, I've written a few key words here around a real thread around multi-sector experience within transport, and I'm sure other sectors have it as well, but there's a real value in bringing not just yourself in, but other people in, regardless of which level of seniority, but people who've got a different way of seeing things. And intersectionality really sits on that, because it sounds really obvious, but the more various experiences and opinions you have around you, you're going to think in a different way. We know there's data that supports the kind of need and the economic benefits of having diverse teams, but actually that sector experience is so huge as well, because it helps to create innovation, it helps to think differently, to think outside of the box. We're not just doing the same old because that's what we did before and that worked. The real sense of growth in those, I'm really seeing that in there. And also that kind of need to share learning. But to share learning, you have to create an environment where you can share learning, where people feel confident and comfortable to be able to say, hey, how about we try it like this? And I'm really kind of hearing that from what you're describing.
Yeah, and I think that, it's really interesting, the word diversity. We use it so liberally these days, don't we? And do people really think diversity? What do we really think? When you say the word diversity, are people thinking, oh, diversity, more women, or oh, diversity, more color? No, diversity means more diverse ways of doing things, thinking. That means age, demographic, backgrounds, skills, knowledge, experience, all of that. That's all diverse. And that's diversity, and not sort of thinking, oh, in a hierarchical way, oh, I will just talk to these people because that's the way we're programmed to do it. Diversity is reaching into your network, wherever that may be, as far and deep as you need to bring together the right minds for a purpose.
Yeah, you nailed it. Honestly, that's just such a beautiful way to describe it, but also like the benefits that we get from it. Thank you so much. We've spoken a lot about some of the work that you've done. I'd really like to talk about now around some of the projects, but also the achievements that you've had. It's almost like a bit of a show and tell, actually. So I'd love to hear some of those specific projects that you've worked on, some of the things you've got over the lines. I think our listeners would love to hear that. And then I'd like to move into some of the ideas around, if you've got insights on some of the trends within the sector, and where people might be thinking about, where does my career go into next? If there's any trends or things that learning that you've gained along the way that you might want to share to our listeners, I think that would be a really great kind of space to take the conversation into.
All right, let's start with, I've talked a little bit about starting and the sort of PPP happening, and there were so many sort of small projects that we had wins on in terms of modernizations and refurbs and that kind of thing. But I guess the sort of the main bulk of my, the significant part of my career has been Crossrail, and working on the Elizabeth line. I was one of the sort of very early doors new people that joined back in 2009. And it may not seem like a win, but it was to me at the time. I remember agreeing the standards baseline for these stations, and the reason why it was a win was we reaped the rewards of that at the end when we were trying to accept these stations, knowing that they'd been built to the right standards, because it wasn't the case that that had happened all the way through, and there was all sorts of challenges. And I worked really hard to try and get us into that position. And I remember setting that up, and people going, "Oh my God, why are we?" And I'm like, "No, we need to do this, because if we don't, then it's not going to work," a kind of thing. We're going to have a problem at the end. So almost being able to see the consequences of it. Those were sort of little things, setting up the assurance approach for the ELU stations and acceptance, that kind of thing. But I guess the real sort of big things and the main things that people will want to hear about is things like, being accountable for the acceptance and the readiness of these 5 LU stations that were going to become part of the LU infrastructure, and being in the thick of the actual bringing into use and the integration of these stations, being there on the night that we sort of created these single mega complexes, starting with Farringdon and then Tottenham Court Road and Liverpool Street and Whitechapel, and of course Bond Street came a little bit later, but also landing these things into our business in TfL as a, almost like business as usual. Here you go, guys, that's over to you now. It's, you can run it. That's not an easy job. That's, that was quite a significant job. But of course, Crossrail had its own challenges, and I had to, bring with the team that I had the knowledge and understanding of what we knew. And remember, we had people that had worked on PPP, so we had done mods. And we had upgraded certain systems, or those people had anyway. And so we knew that what we were doing was kind of similar, not the same, but we should be able to use that learning over here. And I was, using people's experiences from the Jubilee line extension and stuff like that, just to help bring some sort of clarity as how we're going to do things. So there was a lot of that, sort of bringing that learning into Crossrail. And I was part of this group of people that I put together to help develop the earliest opening plan, which was something that needed to be done as soon as, obviously the announcement was made that Crossrail, or the Elizabeth line, was not going to open in 2018, and then Mark had moved over. So, I bought the sort of the LU, but actually the stations aspect of it. So I had a part to play in that. That was quite a big deal, because that set the way for how we would end up delivering the Elizabeth line in the phased approach, the staged approach that we did. But also,
just a small deal, yeah, no biggie.
Well, it was a biggie, but it feels so small now, doesn't it? Now that it's up and running and doing a brilliant, it's phenomenal right now, breaking some amazing records as well. But it was just, yeah, just being part of that and leading the team of just brilliant people who just wanted to do the right thing and just get the railway open was brilliant. And meeting the Queen or watching her walk past because she wasn't very well as well on that day. But you know, I got to be part of the LU sort of team that met Prince Edward, who did come and say hello to us on the day. And yeah, it was an honour to be part of that, riding those trains before anybody else, walking those stations. And every morning, every day that we did an integration, I would be on the call at 4 a.m. and then get on a train and go into the station. And you know, on the night that we did Bond Street, I actually was there myself because I was like, well, this time I'm actually going to be in and do the night shift with the team, even if it meant I was going to be no use to them really, but they said I was going to be useful just being there, so I was, you know. But it was just pretty amazing. So you know, 4 stations, bring them into use, opening them to the public, you know, getting us ready for it, getting us in a position where we could accept it. Lots of delivery of things along the way. Lots of interactions with the wider TfL family in terms of, you know, operations and maintenance and engineering and all sorts, but lots of working with Crossrail to help them help us. It was all about that. You know, I was not going to sit back and let them fail, because they fail, we fail. It wasn't, you know, I wouldn't get the stations if they failed. It was just, well, what would be the point? So rolling our sleeves up, bringing the expertise, helping to deliver in any way we could. And that's what we did. And then I moved over and did the job in Crossrail as the closeout director, but actually did end up becoming the delivery director before I became the closeout director, and finished Bond Street and opened Bond Street Station, which was supposed to be, well, at one point I think we said it was 18 months behind the rest of the railway, and we managed to do it in 5.
Wow.
Which was,
that's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. It's just the power of knowing how you can do something without having to do everything. Do you know, it's that kind of, we use the term minimal viable product a lot, but what does that really mean? It means everything in every sense. You know, if there's a process, minimize it. If there's assets, what's the minimum we can have? What's the minimum functionality? It's the minimum of everything comes together, and you can, you know, just work your way through. But of course you need experts and people that understand these things to do that. So that was quite a defining moment as well in my career, I'd say. So yeah, I think you know, not huge amounts. It's all Crossrail related, but you know, those are my, I guess, career highlights. Being there at the opening and opening Bond Street. Yeah, it was just brilliant. And then I went on to do some of the work on, oversee some of the work on the signalling software upgrades and to actually deliver the end-to-end railway. But just had a brilliant set of people that really knew what they were doing, you know, doing what they do best, to deliver that different setup, because we now had an operational railway as well. So that was always going to be fun. But yeah, we did all that, and then I set up the approach and the closeout of what at one time was the biggest infrastructure project in Europe. Closed it, not just like that, but kind of just like that in a year.
Just, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? And I love the humility with everything, because you're like, yeah, just trying to do the thing, because you do acknowledge that there are teams behind you, it's relationships, it's, you know, it's understanding where value sits, where value lies. But I really genuinely appreciate the humility, because you've just reeled off like a whole load of achievements, and it's really easy just to kind of compare them with really mundane stuff, because it just sounds really easy to describe them, but the layers and the intricacies and the processes and the years and the conversations that are all behind that, it's an effort. And I think, you know, people listening in who are in the transport sector will, you know, be able to understand that everything's an effort, everything's a thing. And certainly when you've got risk attached to it, when you've got public purse attached to it, certainly when everyone's looking at you, you know, I remember people suddenly saying there was a line which was, well, it was on time and on budget when I was there. And the amount of conversations I've had with people when they said that was, and that's usually just, you know, kind of taking away accountability, isn't it? So I just find it really interesting, because it is over the line now. It is absolutely groundbreaking what it was. I worked at Crossrail, I looked after the community investment program, and there's a whole journey in there. I was, you know, route wide, and seeing the impact that we had as I worked for Crossrail as the organisation. We're working with Network Rail, working with all the stations, all the contractors, all of those people, and just seeing the impact that they had on the ground, those local communities. And our thing was all about sustainable impacts. It wasn't just one hit wonders. It was, you know, where you know, where does success lie? Where does impact sit? And so to even just have that small part of it, it just makes you feel really proud, but to know that you've helped people, and it's very clear that everything is around people. I'd love to talk a little bit about maybe what your career looks like. And I know you're at HS2 now, kind of putting your Kim magic over there as well. Do you have any career aspirations that might take you in other places, but also to touch upon some trends that people might see in the transport sector? If you've got any insights to share for our listeners.
Yeah, I guess, let's start with HS2. That was something that came about just as I was finishing up the closeout of Crossrail. And, it was about timing as well, the right time to sort of make a move, I guess. I think I'd got the bug of a major rail infrastructure program, or a major program, if you like. And it almost felt like, we'd come down from this incredible high that we'd been on for many years, culminating in Bond Street and the final end-to-end railway, and then going, what now? So obviously if HS2 comes calling, it's not necessarily something you're going to turn your nose up at. And I had sort of in the past not entertained any idea of leaving, which I had opportunity to, but I didn't. I wanted to see through Crossrail. But that was the right time to do it. So I made the move. Like I said, it was an external secondment. And then I've been there for it's been just over a year, maybe a year and 2 months, 3 months. So not very long, but started working on stations, and then I've been doing some work on sort of transitioning the organisation or the delivery functions into sort of this sort of more sort of delivery focused program, and also more recently working on this new sort of Rail Systems Alliance approach. It's not a new approach in sort of projects normally, but actually it is something different for HS2 in the way they're setting it up. So I'm helping sort of create that, and some of what I've learned from Crossrail and some of what I know. When you've been there and you've seen what happens at the end, it's almost the value comes at the beginning of doing things, setting things up so that you do get it right for when you get to that same point that we did on Crossrail. Yeah, lots of variety at the moment.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch this based on where your career takes you, because I feel like there's so much in there. And then there's the next project. And even with HS2, I went to HS2 after Crossrail as well. And these projects are huge projects. And it's really interesting that you said about staying, because it's really easy to move project to project, and you do see people, and the knowledge goes with people if people jump from project to project. And so to be able to stay anywhere for a long amount of time, or to have people who transition and share that information, I think is really vital for the sector as a whole, because you do lose really good information. Really looking forward to seeing where your next steps take you. So do you have like 3 pieces of advice for our listeners? 3 things you'd like to kind of impart with people? It could be around representation, it could be around people, it could be leadership style, it could be just the sector as a whole, but just 3 things that you'd like to have as takeaways or advice.
I guess I'd say find your sponsor, find your person, find that person that you can trust in wherever you are, whatever you're doing, the one that's going to help you, give you confidence. Seek them out. You'll gravitate towards them. They may be speaking in a big forum and you'll go, I really heard what they were saying. I really, you were really engaged in what they were saying. Well, bring them, ask them, because most people won't say no. So I think find that person, find that sponsor, that connection that's going to help you and be your sponsor. I think the other thing is, back yourself as well to some extent, and trust your instincts. And I think that sometimes people lose confidence because they think, oh no, I can't say that, or no, you can. So you kind of you have to back yourself a little bit, and I guess haven't I really backed myself? Having sponsors is great, and having them around me was great, but I had to back myself. I couldn't not back myself. And I think just be yourself and be authentically you. I think that, and this probably goes more for some of the young women that we may have in the industry that are just starting out and things like that, and maybe they believe they need to be a certain way or behave a certain way to fit in to what is really a very male industry still. I don't think you do. I think you just need to be you. And I just think you need to just do you, and you will find that doing you is enough, because people are watching and they're listening and they're seeing you. Just don't try and be anything other than that, and just be authentically yourself.
Wonderful, Kim. That's a really great takeaways. And I think that was a great place to leave today's episode. But thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm really looking forward to joining our next guest on the next episode of the Women in Transport podcast. But thank you so much, Kim, for today.
Thank you.